Hey, shalom, shalom. I want to start off by giving all praises unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahawashi, Bahashem, Hakwadash. Double honor to our apostles who are elders who rule well. Blessings and salutations to you brothers out there teaching and enduring truth and sincerity. This is Rob Moffitt in Nebraska camp. And I just want to, do a lesson in regards to, the brothers out there in London that tore a hole in vocab, you know, um, and just stirred up the pot for us to go back into things that's already been went into. And brothers pretty much covered a lot of areas, so I just wanted to take an angle, within that, from I'm just going to address certain angles in brief of, that as was supposed, how that was, in parentheses and being added, you know, the fact that the virgin birth in itself, King Solomon himself said that no man was born any different. Okay. No man was born and he knew the knowledge of the present, past, and the future. He had knowledge of everything. So if he said it, then it's already solidified. That's going back to the book of Wisdom of Solomon. And I'm just breezing over these things, going into the sperm of the seed, the generation, you know, uh, in Matthew's 1, there's proof that Yahawashi's lineage goes back to King David through Solomon. Okay, that's a key point because there's another lineage that goes into Mary's lineage, which her lineage, don't go through Solomon, even though goes through King David. Okay, because the prophecy was pushed through Solomon. All right, from King David to Solomon, which is very key because Mary's lineage don't go from King David to Solomon. Okay, so that's another point. All right. And the brother in London brought a fire point, which is going over how, in going to the courts from the Gentiles to the Israelites to the women to the men, and Yahushua being able to get into those courts is proof that if he's able to get where the men at, is proof that his lineage goes back and they can find a Urim and Thummim. Well, not find a Urim and Thummim, that's how they, found out. And you can go into that via through the Ezra when we was building the walls back up, and you had to find a priesthood, so that shows the importance of genealogy and how we stuck to it. And that Christians' arguments are, well, for God it could be anything. Well, why are you abiding by scriptures? You could just make it up as you go at that point, right? So that's not true. We could do all things through Yahushua strengthens us. The Lord can do anything. Yes, that's true, but what he established and what he sets forth, all right, can no man undo, all right? And he set it up through genealogy. He set it up through the fact that and Israel followed that, all right? There was no king that sat on the throne outside of the Hasmonean dynasty. Again, there's no king that sat on the throne of Israel outside of the Hasmonean dynasty that weren't through the lineage of King David, via through the tribe of Judah, because the Jeroboam-Rehoboam situation caused that split. But even on the southern kingdom always kept the lineage of King David on the throne, even when, the Lord was going to wipe them out through Jezebel and that situation. There still was the younger son that was hid in the temple. Okay, so the Lord kept his word with that all the way down to Joseph. When you read Matthew chapter 1, it will give you that list. Okay, the same place he said, I suppose, to give you the list of all the men. They mention women for their specified reasons, but when you go back, you can go to every story. Take your time and read. And you can just go into the blue letter and click on every person in Matthew chapter 1 and go to every moment and see how one person passes another person, passes the next person, passes the next person. Give diligence to, in your studies, you know. So the point I wanted to bring out is, why is this such a big deal? Because it's idol worship. All right. And so when we go into um Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 14, verse 12, it says, "For the devising of idols was the beginning of spiritual fornication, and the invention of them the corruption of life." And it was a corruption of our life. And the devising of an idol was the whole Trinity, the Semiramis, Tammuz. And this has been going on way before the time of Yahawashi. It wasn't like it happened and then everybody got infatuated and created a new story about it. Esau created his version, and that's the point, is that this particular idol was passed down from generation to generation to generation. All right. Just like, the way I like to explain is that these other nations, we are people of oration. So our stories went abroad. Okay. Just like the nations knew about the Passover and the deliverance of us out of Egypt. Okay. All the nations knew about that. Our reputation preceded us. And not only that, but we were a people of oration. So, prophecies and all that would have been orated, and spoken on. All right. So I like to say that these nations oftentimes jock out style or have their version of the story. Okay. But when you get into these idols, the core is really the beginning harvest to the end harvest is where the core of this idol happens. And it goes back to Diana. It goes back to, Baal. All right. It goes back to, Zeus. It goes back to, different versions of gods through, different nations. Egypt has Isis and Horus. Babylon and Assyria has Semiramis and Tammuz. The Neo-Babylonians. You know what I'm saying? And all these gods in the Greco-Roman, has Diana. Okay. All these, connect because it goes into, when you go into the scriptures, it speaks on, Astaroth or Astarte. Okay. Now I'll get that real quick. Yeah. So once we go into, First Kings 11:4, it says, "For it came to pass when Solomon was old that his wives turned away his heart after other gods, and his heart was not perfect with the Lord his power, as was the heart of David his father. For Solomon went after Ashtaroth, the goddess of the Zidonians, and after Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites." All right. And the point was Ashtoreth. Okay. So when you go into, the Ashtoreth or Ashtaroth, okay, it says Ashtaroth is a figure that appears. I'm reading from Chat GPT, destroying the ecosystem real quick. Yeah. The earth is going to be replenished, by the way. Esau doing all this stuff to pollute the earth, but the earth is going to abide forever. So the Lord is going to allow us to replenish all this, so you could talk about our environmental use all you want. We're going to be the ones that fix the earth. But anyways, we're going to get back to it. It says Astaroth is a figure that appears in various medieval and modern demonological texts. In those traditions, Astaroth is often described as a powerful demon and is sometimes linked historically and controversially to the ancient Near Eastern goddess Astarte. Okay, so when you go into Astarte, it says, Astarte was a major goddess of the ancient Near East worship among the Canaanites, the Phoenicians, and the Egyptians. All right. There's a linkage there with us in those nations. Canaanites always been around us via the Philistines. You know what I'm saying? When we took the land of Canaan. So, and Jacob has always adapted. It shows that when you read Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Isaiah, and our people were adhering to the gods of those nations before they even took us over. That was the problem in the first place on why we got took over by Nebuchadnezzar, because our people were adhering to those gods. So if we were in Egypt in captivity, yeah, we served our Lord, but even our people, proven when we were in the wilderness and when they built the calf, our people still was dibbling and dabbling with those false idols. Okay, so you got to connect the dots. You got to read and use some common sense that our people would attach, and our people do it to this day. All right. They'll call on the Most High, but then they'll be into feminism. They'll call on the Most High, but still be into gang banging. You know, Alizé will show you that. Okay. Because that ain't the God, that's a God of war right there. I forget the God, that it goes back to, but it's a God of pretty much violence. And all these gods, these false gods, are actually demons. Because when you serve these guys, they have a structure, but even when you serve them, demons get on you. You know what I'm saying? The demon of violence is the principle. You gotta be violent, or you gotta be, this or that, and Baal goes back to prosperity. Okay. But that Baal is really hidden within these generations of idols / demons. And it causes you to have a certain mindset, a certain way of worship. Okay. Your soul is attached to it. Your soul gets attached to prosperity. Your soul gets attached to violence. Okay. Not in the Baal, but with I forget oh man, if it escapes me, but there's a God of war, you know, um, that, and that's why Jake adheres to violence. They want to see people get knocked out all the time. They want to see people get shot up. You know what I'm saying? Because ain't nothing but a demon. You know what I'm saying? And Jake could be in to the Lord and to be attached to that. Okay. So it says, the God of Canaanites, Phoenicians, and as a deity of love, war, and fertility. That fertility really goes back to, uh, you know, um, um, prosperity. Okay. Giving birth. Because that's why when you go into, like, when Yahawashi was walking the earth, because he came in the flesh. That's a key thing that needs to be said. He came in the flesh, because that's a part of that deity and that false God. That's why certain Christians say he came in the spirit, because, and Salaki is going to be a little lengthy because there's certain excerpts I'm going to read, but there's a point that calls it the dying God. So that's why they try to connect and give that immaculate conception, which connects us to Ishtar, Semiramis and Tammuz, Isis and Horus. It's the dying God. So that's why they want Yahawashi to be God in the flesh, so that they can claim him to be what? The dying God through his crucifixion. Okay? So this ain't nothing, but they're trying to manipulate what actually happened and change it to pagan worship. And our people are so gone that they don't know that they're worshiping that. And it's just that God just takes new forms, and then in today's form is Jesus. So, Jesus, whatever you want to call him. Okay? He just took a different form. All right? So that's why they believe in that, because then you could say that God died, dying God. All right? Now I'll give that reference as well. So when you go into the Queen of Heaven, as Salaki says, revered as the Queen of Heaven, she embodied the erotic power of martial strength, her cult spreading widely across the Mediterranean world through Phoenician trade and colonization, because that's the Mesopotamian area, land of two rivers. And the heathens didn't have a God, so they worship horses, they worship crops, they worship, because sometimes famine had happened, and the main time of worship that they wanted to worship this God of fertility was in the time of harvest, which is the spring, or the time of crops growing. They want to pray to God, to that idol, to say, hey, pretty much have our crops grow. And in today's time, the crops is going, it's talking about your bank account growing. All right. Prosperity, the demon of prosperity. It's the same thing, the praying for rain. Okay. So all this goes and links back to that core when you collect all this mess and put it together, and we don't really get into all that, but the spirit just had me get into it and be intrigued about it. But at the end of the day, that's what it all boils back to, is just worshiping the God of prosperity, the God of fertility, the ability to win and to conquer, you know what I'm saying? Because, like it says, suppose ye thinking the gain is godliness. That's where they got to. Okay. So we're going to get a scripture real quick. So when you go into, Jeremiah chapter 7 and 18, or 7 and 17, seest thou not what they do in the cities of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem? The children gather wood, and this is before Nebuchadnezzar came down on them. Understand that. It wasn't like Nebuchadnezzar came down on them, took them into Babylon, and then he started doing that. They was already, ride by running to to the cities, running to these powerful cities, because what was happening is we started dropping economically, and then the other nations was rising up around us, and our people was like looking at the city and being marveling at it. Oh, Babylon's busting. Running over there and coming back, and you coming out, you got a Babylonian garment, and you go looking fresh, and then everybody like, they get wooed up, and then they go over there, and then it started becoming a thing. The Lord's like getting pissed off, man, because even certain kings, what I'm saying, I believe Zedekiah, he was sacrificing, making league with Babylon, sacrificing children to Baal. Okay, and the people, it tells you that Josephus, Israel was checking them and like, man, what you doing? And he kept on like making excuses, like, nah, I'm trying to make contracts with him. That's why don't trip. And it was like kind of like, all right. And then it was like, nah, you tripping. You know what I'm saying? But, getting back to what, in verse 18 it says, the children gather wood and the fathers kindle fire and the women knead their dough to make cakes to the queen of heaven, and to pour out drink offerings unto other gods, that they may provoke me to anger. All right. And this is why the Lord sent Nebuchadnezzar on them. So this was before, all right, which proved that our people was into them other gods, even though they were in Israel. And the scripture says there's no new thing under the sun. Our people do the same thing. They rebel. That's why he said the whole head is sick. And so he gathered an election out of that. And if you identify the elect, just like you're going to the Maccabees, just like you're going to Tobit, you're going to Jeremiah, there's people that separated themselves, the elect. Okay, there's always been an election. They have not bowed the knee to the image of Baal and were separating themselves and got afflicted because of it, even from our own people. Especially, you can really get in detail through the Hasmonean dynasty, to where our people were being hated on and by our own people. Okay, just like we're hated on by our own people. Who was up there with vocab, sitting there leading the charge? Niggas. Okay. Now, mind you, Edomites is doing all this, raising all this hell on us, bro. And it's evidence. This is another thing. It's like common sense that this dude is some type of CIA op or something around that area. It's because his thing is that he got to attack us because what we're teaching pulls people away from the Lord, right? But the scriptures tell you, if anybody deny that the Lord is not the Messiah or came in the flesh, he's the spirit of the Antichrist. So these Amalekites, small hats that are in our land, they don't believe in the Lord at all. Openly, doctrinally, they wrote it in books, but he has no gripe with them. That should raise a red flag. If his whole premise is that we're not teaching the Lord the right way, they vehemently and blatantly disregard him. And he has nothing to say. Not only has nothing to say, but he omits their wickedness when they do things. He ain't going to Israel. He ain't put out no videos addressing how they talking about how the Lord is burning an excrement in hell because of what he did. He's not addressing that. But the scriptures clearly say you're not supposed to do that. If you're an apologist, you're not addressing it. So something is clearly, he has an operation. He has a mission to uphold, and that's to break us down. You know what I'm saying? And it's clear. It was very clear to me once I seen him in the NFL meeting telling a bunch of NFL players with his bulk of Jake with money, because he's trying to, Esau is scared of what we're doing, and he don't want it to get no financial traction to where you'll get a bunch of NFL players sitting there shooting us money and getting our track, which we don't need any money, but Esau's carnal, so he think he could stop it there through those waves. So how does a person like that, NFL don't get down like that? They ain't into all that, bro. They're no fun league, man. They're very strict. So why is that a case of point to come up? Who connected that link? Who connected that dot from vocab to the NFL? The NFL ain't gonna just walk, oh, vocab, come on in. Them small hats had to tell them, let him in there and let him make sure that they don't get out there and get on no big screen Especially since Kaepernick did what he did. Let him get on no big screen and say anything about the Lord, anything about them being Israelites. Because once, Aaron Donald or Patrick Mahomes say anything, it's a wrap. It's a wrap. All right. So they had to quench that fire in some type of way. And that's just me speculating. It just don't make sense. They talk about finances. They'll talk about staying clean. But I've never seen nobody make sure somebody ain't Muslim and make sure they ain't this. They don't care about none of that. But y'all spoke out and make sure they're not no Israelites. Red flag. All right. But continuing on, so Bible Shah, bear with me. I'm coming in and out, reading excerpts. So I'm reading from the book. It's called Tammuz and Ishtar, a monograph upon Babylonian religion and theology, containing extensive extracts from the Tammuz liturgies and all of the Arbella oracles by Stephen Langdon. All right, Scholar Select. So pretty much he got all kind of like artifacts and like poems and things that reference these things and pretty much, culminated together, consolidated it, and came to a conclusion. All right. So, in chapter one, I'm not going to get on the chapter. I'm just start reading excerpts. So just follow along if you can. You know what I'm saying? It says Tammuz is the name of the Babylonian god who corresponds to the Egyptian Osiris, the Phoenician and Greek Adonis, Delirious, if you know, you know, the Phrygian Attis, and other well-known type of what? Dying son of Mother Earth. Okay? Oh, blessed be the paps that's why the Lord cut her that way. Because he knew what our people was into. He says, no, blessed be the Father, spirits and live. He didn't say, nah, I came from Joseph. That wasn't the argument. He was saying, nah, this year, hey, all praise to Yahawashi Yahawashi. He laid the axe straight to the root. This ain't no idol worship over here, baby. You know what I'm saying? Cause she was saying, blessed, ain't a woman, blessed be your mama if she gave you birth. And it's like, well, what about the dad? That's normally the rhetoric nowadays, right? Why nobody says something, oh, your mom blessed you. No, bless God. No, cause they were trying to insinuate, you know what I'm saying, that connection. You know what I'm saying? And or even the reference of it. Even if she didn't know, that's the way they think because of that Queen of Heaven. Even to this day, our people do the same rhetoric, not knowing that that's what it goes back to. All that woman worship. Blessed be the woman. Oh, the woman is special because she can give birth. Well, alligators could give birth. Female alligators. Do that make them goddesses? You know what I'm saying? Do that make them special? An ostrich. Okay? Praying mantises. Birds. Every creeping thing. So that's dumb logic. And people are willing to omit context clues that make sense and act like they're so smart that they just skip over plain out information. But let's get back to it. It says Ezekiel tells us that the wailings for Tammuz were practiced in the temple at Jerusalem in the early part of the 6th century BC. And this worship must have been known and practiced through Western Asia, where Tammuz and Adonis of Byblos were identified. The name itself is Sumerian and means the faithful son. He appears at dawn of history, certainly before 3000 BC. Okay? So, continuing on, it says, certain it is that the son of the Virgin Mother, whom the shadows of the netherworld each year claim as a divine sacrifice for man and beast and vegetation, forms an important part of the earliest known religious worship. So it was all about crops coming in. That's why you get Easter. They try to manipulate our story with that, with pagan worship. Okay, we always held strong to our stories. Our people deviated, but there was always a root path to where you knew that was BS. Okay, but when we fell away, there was no prophet, there was no king, there was no nothing, and it made that path obscured. Okay, and the elect, okay, through Abba Bivens, all our predecessors, whom vocab try to chop at, okay, that's where the path has been started getting hacked down and cleared out. Like a person that's mowing lawns, it looked like a bunch of grass, but if you chop it down, you start seeing that concrete. You start seeing where that path was laid. And that's what our predecessors did. And we came back and started cleaning up that path more and more. Okay? And they don't like that. All right? It says, as among the Western Semites, this ancient people probably adopted Mother Earth as the first deity throughout their history from the most ancient period to the very end of their existence. All right, and it's just speaking on Slovakia. I'll go read up a little bit. It says, this theology of genderless divinities appears to be very primitive in Babylonia, but it was probably developed by the Sumerians from a more natural theology, because the reason why Sumerians has a good grip on it, and Sumeria, I believe that's like the first known civilization that they say, and they were the Mesopotamian area, and you could say I think they go back to the people of Earth and all that. You know what I'm saying? Don't correct me if I'm wrong. Any brother, but they were a big people of irrigation because they relied on those rivers, the two rivers, and they dug, and created aqueducts, and so they was big on serving the God of fresh crops and everything, praying that the crops don't fail. Okay, and so that's why that spring is a thing, and then end harvest is a thing. Okay, so continuing on, it says a race, the unmarried mother goddess is a dominating figure that persists in unchanging influence in the vast and complex pantheon. The intensity of the worship of other gods depended somewhat upon the political importance of the cities where their chief cult exists. All right, so pretty much if you needed irrigation, if you know what I'm saying, if you needed, fertility, you needed prosperity, because capitalism, through oppression of capitalism, you're gonna look for prosperity. So they're gonna give you a God that says you got a blessing coming, you got a blessing. You're gonna serve that God in hopes that it alleviates your oppression. So it's you oppress people and then give them a way out, and you give them Jesus, the prosperity God, and you think that's the God of the Bible. Really, it's Baal. It's really Semiramis and Tammuz. It really goes back to that. And you're worshiping a false God, fighting tooth and nail. But Esau's so slick with it, he got you thinking you in the Bible going crazy. When really you just got the Bible in your hand, worshiping the idol. Okay. That's why the Holy Spirit has to get involved, because without the Holy Spirit, the book is just a book, just another knowledge like any other book. You know what I'm saying? Now, there's historical things you get smarter and wiser with, but when it comes to these prophecies and understanding these dark mysteries, the Holy Spirit got to rest on you, man. All right? It says, since the worship of the mother goddess and her son evidently forms the earliest element in human religion, which is bullshit, you gotta sift through the bones. The earliest forms is always, it goes back to Egypt, it goes back to Adam and Eve. The Lord's always been there. We always knew, all right, that there's the higher power. Just like people would say Allahu Akbar. There's only one power, right? We have the same salute, all right, but we ain't jocking their salute. They got that from us, okay? You know what I'm saying? That say, Shema Yash'Allah, Yahweh Elohim, Yahweh Echad, behold our power. Yahweh is one power. Okay? So they get the salute from us. Alright? It says we should conclude that, as the book of Genesis asserts, man began to worship the Most High and to found a social state in Mesopotamia. Okay? Because they're being technical. But it is true. Alright? It says the dying God in a theological aspect. It says the dying God, who represents the element of fresh water, is a type developed by a people after they settled in a land dependent on irrigation. When we proceed to study the prayers, liturgies, and rituals of the cult, we must therefore expect to find conflicting elements asserting themselves. Because this what really drew my interest. It's like, okay, we know about these guys, but there's a form of worship. There's a do and don't to it. Just like there's a do and don't to our belief system. You can't just get up and there's 10 commandments, there's commandments go beyond that, and there's a form of worship to our power. And that form of worship connects us to the power because our wisdom is our laws is our wisdom inside of the nations. And this is what they try to jack our style. Okay? They feel they try to keep up. But they can't choose our power. Some of them did, but Nebuchadnezzar and them did it, but they was off into any other god. They didn't respect no guys. They thought there was many guys. You know what I'm saying? Because they'll tell you that, or they tell Daniel, I believe your power is a real power, but then he'll say, I'm a god. And then he'll turn around and worship another guy. He had hella gods up in his den. He thought he was a god. He could harness him like Thanos or something, right? But it says the dying god appears as intimately connected with the pantheon of the ocean. He here becomes under the generic name of Dumuzi, or faithful son, a specific figure, the ceremony known as the annual wailing for Tammuz. I've seen women weeping for Tammuz. Why did they? That's what I'm saying. You read in scriptures, they say that weeping for Tammuz. Again, you filter everything through the scriptures. All right? You don't filter the scriptures through everything. So you gotta, the scriptures is a filter. So when it says weeping for Tammuz, I was like, man, well, why were they weeping? Why were they crawling on their knees? Why were they doing that? You know what I'm saying? And this explains it. Okay, it says the ceremony known as the annual wailing for Tammuz certainly occurred in midsummer and probably continued during the month originally known as the month of the festival of Tammuz. This vague and generic deity originally appearing as son of Mother Earth in many aspects, some of which developed into local gods and constructed by the theologians into a definite deity, possessed no temple of his own, as at Byblos, the worshippers of Adonis performed their services in the temple of Astarte. So in Babylonia, the central cult of Tammuz was attached to the temple of Inini, Inni, right? The mother goddess Eneret, Erech. Okay, this famous temple century of the cult of the Virgin Mother from remotest antiquity. Characteristics of this worship is the figure of the desolate mother wandering in the barren fields in the desolate sheepfolds, or sitting in her temple wailing for the lost son and lover. The people too take part in this sorrowful service. It reads like an excerpt. For the far removed, there is wailing. So there was wailing. Pretty much Tammuz died, and everybody weeps for him. They even take and I'll get to it. They take like a idol and they pour it into the river and let it drop into the river, and that's significant for him going to the underworld and passing. And I'm telling you, man, they just jacked our style and remixed the story, okay, and then change it to serving man and not worshiping man and not the creator. Okay, worshiping vegetation, worshiping horses, worshiping winning and victory, supposing gain is godliness. Okay, it says in inner, high and low this is like a poem. In inner, high and low there is weeping and wailing. For the house of the Lord they raise. The wailing is for the plants. The first lament is, they grow not. The wailing is for the barley, the ears, they grow not. For the habitation of the flocks it is, they produce not. For the perishing wedded ones, they perish. Children it is, the dark-headed people create not. The wailing is for the great river. It brings forth the flood no more. Because again, they're praying for irrigation. The thing is that the cycle of summer, winter, spring, fall, when winter comes, it was like, oh, he's dead, there's no crops in it, and they wail and they pray and they cry for summer or spring to come so that everything could come back to life. And they believe that if they do it, they weren't going to get no harvest, which is stupidity, okay? It says, and I ain't going to read that no more of that, but it says, it is highly probable that the Babylonian rite passed into Greek religion through Byblos and Cyprus, according to Joseph G. Frazier, when I said I read it again, it is highly probable that the Babylonian rite, Rite, which is like a way of worship, passed into Greek religion through Byblus and Cyprus. According to Joseph G. Frazier, this ritual of drowning by water is a piece of magic intended to induce the return of the rains. Okay, I'm gonna jump again. That in the periods of wailing, the women neither ate grain nor ground in their meals, for this is the body of Tammuz. On the other hand, it is certain that the hope of life depended absolutely upon his resurrection. Okay, so it's the dying God that's resurrected. They remix the story. Okay, and it's already, again, how can they remix it before Yahawashi is crucified? Because it was already prophesied. All right, we already knew it to a point. You know what I'm saying? So it was already there. You know, you got examples of the 17 weeks. You know what I'm saying? You got the examples of when King David, it was prophesied. You know what I'm saying? Like it was already a known thing that a deliverer, a Messiah would come. Okay, but they just allocated it to their own thing. All right, and you can have demons that get on them and have them, start that as well. Okay. On the other hand, it is certain that the hope of life depended absolutely upon his resurrection. It is true that after the descent into Hades, one liturgy says life unto distant days is no more, but we are probably to understand that the Babylonians refer to old age, not to eternal life. Because then, that's the separation. It says the God, so like I'm going to say, the God who had disappeared was called the shepherd, who had left his sheep, and the Litanius described the shepherd of the flock sitting in sorrow and wailing for Tammuz, as one striking passage put it. Him of the plains why have they slain? The shepherd, the wise one, the man of sorrows, why have they slain? All right? And it goes on and on and on. I'm not going to read all that. So I'm going to continue on. It says, it is of course true that the virgin nature goddess is a deity much older than half-mortal sun. In the beginning, mankind may have regarded the withering of the flowers and drying up of the brooks, the fall of the corn before the sickle of the harvest, as a sign that the deity of nature herself had gone to Hades. So pretty much, Semiramis would go to Hades and get her son back. That's like the whole, like Greek mythology, that they always got stories that this person, he brings the sun down and pull the moon up, and you can see it in there's a movie that shows it. It's like the Prince of Egypt or something, and he got like power to turn to like a griffin and all that, and go up to this, and the guy's pulling the moon and they're pulling the sun, and he's fighting it, so which is an entertaining movie, but you could get into that Egyptian bull BS, for lack of better words, you know. So it says the Samaritans identified the Virgin Mother with the star Sirius, Sirius XM and things like that. These are a bunch of gods all over, bro. It appears that at 3000 BC, the star Sirius disappeared about April 11th and remains invisible for nearly 2 months. It seems, therefore, that the ancients supposed that the goddess had descended with her star into Aralu, or Sheol, its quest of her lover. This theory is fully substantiated by an unpublished tablet in the Museum of Constantinople, which describes Enini interceding with the Queen of Hades for the release of Tammuz. She is represented as having descended to the court of Escrigo, whom she addresses in the following lines: O Queen of the great place in I ain't read all that. You know what I'm saying? See, and I'm gonna read one more excerpt, a couple more excerpts, because I want to get into. It says, in reading the citations which have been given from official litigaries, one confused by the various relations which exist between mother and son. Now he is her consort, now her brother, now a youth who dies in the strength of manhood, now an infant fed at the breast, Again, the infant fed at the breast, because you got to remember that the Mona, I forget, the Madonna with the mother and the son. That's an idol, because they got one with the scar on the mother face. That's an idol. Okay. It says the infant represents the sprouting corn and the growing grass. The young man represents the corn which falls before the sickle. Okay. So when you go into that, it'll show that. And they call it what? The dying God. It says in the original ritual, we suppose that the return from the underworld occurred in the spring. In other words, the original service had at least two ceremonies. On one hand, the wailing and the descent into hell, and on the other hand, the resurrection and the marriage. So the descent into hell is the winter, then the resurrection come in the spring. Now I could be wrong, but it's pretty much, it deals with beginning harvest and end harvest. All right. But the thing is that our high holy days deal with beginning harvest and end harvest as well. All right. Again, it just remakes our stories. That's all it is going back and forth. And pretty much they try to allocate Yahawashi with the dying God. That's why they want him to believe, they want people to believe that he is the Most High. He's not the Most High. All right. Yahawashi is the first created spirit of the Most High, with all sons of the Most High in spirit. Okay? Even Satan is son of the Most High. Go into Job, it'll tell you that. Why? Because every spirit that was created comes from him, which makes us all sons of the Most High. And when we come in the flesh, then we're in the flesh sons of certain male or carnal procreators. Yahawashi was the son of Joseph, and that was known. Okay? So that's all I wanted to bring out, man. Hopefully it was edifying. With that being said, I'll give all praises unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahawashi, Bahashem, Rachakwadash. Double honor to our apostles who are elders who rule well. Blessings and salutations to you brothers out there teaching and enduring truth and sincerity. Shalom.